Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Layer by Layer, the show about 3D printing and our place at Slant 3D inside the industry. Today we're going to be talking about ProtoLabs rebranding hubs, Formlabs adding a pump, Align technology expanding, and a number of things on potentially UV resistance and patents and NDAs. So it should be interesting, but let's go ahead and start off with the news here. So, Actual furniture? Oh, it's actual furniture. Actual furniture 3D printed with recycled Lenovo e-waste heads to CES. This is via TCT, I believe. The 3D printed poofs presented at CES 2024 were produced using Actual's large format polymer extrusion technology, which was previously been adopted by brands like Tiffany, blah, 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 blah. And use unique feedstocks such as ocean waste and bio-based terrazzo flooring material. I don't know any words about furniture, but actual furniture. They're using Lenovo leftover laptop cases and that kind of thing to grind up, melt, and turn into furniture, 3D printed furniture. That's a good idea. That's a great idea. Large format printing has a huge amount of potential with furniture that's not really being utilized right now. So there's good for them. And using plastic waste can be tough to recycle. People have asked this of us with the 3D printing materials and like reject parts inside of our print farms. Why don't you grind it up, turn it back into filament? Keeping it straight, organized, and clean are all fairly difficult problems until you get to a certain size. However, if you want to make final good parts like we do, because we don't want to make garbage for our clients. But in this case, using plastic waste where it's maybe non-uniform and you just can kind of force it through a large format extruder like this to where it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect and it certainly isn't like super structural or refined in that kind of a way. Using plastic waste in that format is excellent. They should call us. We'll send them stuff. And they can have a bunch of reject parts occasionally for that kind of thing. But no, that's a great application for 3D printing, a large format 3D printing and using waste. It's a great application of how printing can help with plastic waste. So good for them. It's at CES. We don't have a lot of CES stories this year. ProtoLabs rebrands hubs as ProtoLabs Network. The rebrand comes nearly 3 years to the day that ProtoLabs takeover was completed, with the parent company saying that the ProtoLabs network will give users access to more than 250 suppliers globally. This, the company believes, will allow users to take advantage of competitive prices, faster lead times, and unified customer experience. It comes after a successful period for Hubs, who has exhibited significant year-over-year revenue growth in 2023 and has grown its network to 250 people. Okay. Yes. So Hubs, for those who don't know, used to be 3D Hubs, which was an independent company, which was acquired by ProtoLabs in like 2018, 2019 or so. But 3D Hubs was the first crowd 3D printing service where, you found somebody with a 3D printer in your network and they'll print a part for you. And that failed. And the reason it failed is because there is no way to have good quality control when every person has a different 3D printer and every person has a different experience level. So they had a really tough time early on having customers stay with the marketplace because they were matching 3D printers to customers. And it was great for 3D printers because they could get some traffic use their 3D printer and make money with their printer, which at the time were more expensive than they are right now, but not by much. But the customers had a terrible experience because they could never get the same part. Eventually, Hubs kind of caught on to this and they formalized really a lot. And they basically said, okay, you can only have these printers. They generally weren't desktop printers. They were generally Stratasys ones. And they started bringing in like machining and turning into effectively a Xometry. And then ProtoLabs bought them as they were building that out. I think the purchase was like $20 or $50 million. It might have been more, actually. I feel like it was a fairly large. Maybe it wasn't announced. Maybe that's what it was. I can't remember the number. But anyhow, when Hubs when 3D Hubs was purchased, 3D Hubs changed its name to Hubs. ProtoLabs bought Hubs And for the last 3 years, they've been kind of two separate entities. So now ProtoLabs is just changing the branding fully so that people aren't confused because everybody knows now it's a ProtoLabs company. It was Hubs, then it was Hubs, a ProtoLabs company, and now it's ProtoLabs Network. And ProtoLabs, this was kind of a big break off for ProtoLabs because ProtoLabs historically has always used entirely internal production. When they first started, they were just a bunch of injection molding machines lined up in CNC machines inside of a warehouse, making parts and pieces for people very reliably and riding on the coattails of Tesla a lot because they were the only service who could reliably and with good quality produce good parts. Rick Fulop, who is the CEO of Desktop Metal right now, was one of the founders of ProtoLabs. So interesting backstory there. ProtoLabs has been public for a number of years. They got a bump during COVID, all the rest of it. They're a well-run company. But yeah, so this is good. Yeah, they changed the branding of it. The network, I think, is certainly seeing lots of growth because it allowed ProtoLabs to continue to scale because it's really expensive to bring in a lot of machinery, whereas if you just bring on qualified shops, you can get a lot more capacity without having to pay for it yourself. And Hubs was in a good position to do that because that was effectively their model, and they started out with low-hanging fruit of the general 3D printing community with guys with just a 3D printer, and then they formalized it to machine shops, qualified printers, certain qualified processes. For a certain period of time, we were part of the Hubs network. And the qualification process was printing out parts. They received them and checked them. In the early days, it was like you sent a photo or something like that or whatever. And so many people downloaded photos from the internet and sent them those that it was probably just a huge amount of fraud. But the qualification process was really quite rigorous. So great. And they're doing well, and they've gone even further. Good for them. And then Formlabs adds resin pumping system and new manufacturing and dental materials to fuel in-house production. Formlabs has announced its new resin pumping system as well as two new materials, polypropylene powder and premium teeth resin at CES 2024. The new releases are set to increase the efficiency, versatility, and scalability of its 3D printing ecosystem, according to the company, and will bolster in-house printing for consumer goods, dental appliances, and so on and so forth. Good. Formlabs machines have never had enough resin capacity in the back. However, this pump, it mounts onto just a Formlabs bottle, which I believe is like a gallon, is about the size that they use, or it might be a metric measurement. I don't know. I honestly have not touched a Formlabs machine in a couple of years, but it's good. Yes, you don't have to worry about the machine running out. They had a lot of good safeties in there, I believe. I think they've had like a resin level sensor for a while and all that kind of thing. But good. You can actually get some throughput on it to the tune of a bottle of resin, which, given the speed of them, would certainly give you a day or two, I believe. But good. Yeah, great. Good for them. Gabe, when are you guys going to put in resin? Not soon. The reason we don't use resin machines at Slant 3D is because our fundamental charter is build a warehouse where the shelves make the product. Resin cannot fulfill that charter. Resin can't do that. FDM is the only 3D printing process to where we could set up a print farm inside of an Amazon warehouse, and a normal worker can come by, pull a part off a machine, and throw it in a box and it go out the door without subsequent processing. Resin has to be cured, has to be plucked, has to be handled just so. Powder is the same way. So those are not viable for on-demand printing, certainly not at the scale that we do it, and not in a safe and reliable type of way. So that's where FDM just has a very huge advantage over resin or powder, because it's clean. It's clean, it's easy, it's understandable, it's safe, where these other ones just aren't. So that's the reason we don't use resin. So it doesn't really matter what scale Formlabs gets to with their machines. They're not really on the menu for a company like us, because if a part finishes up on a Formlabs machine, it's great. Oh, great. Grab it with gloves. Make sure you don't put fingerprints on it. Make sure all the resin drips off correctly. And then you got to go wash it, go put it in a UV oven for 15 minutes, and then pluck off the supports that resin still needs. And then you can ship it out the door. Whereas right now, if somebody's designing a good FDM part, you can scrape it off the machine, shove it in a box, shove it out the door, and it's magic. And a part can ship in 24 hours. And you have a warehouse where the shelves are making the product. Infinite selection, zero inventory, and it's clean, it's safe, and it's easy. And it also fits into existing warehouse infrastructure. Align Technology completes €79 million acquisition of Cubicure. Align Technology has moved to acquire Cubicure, and it looks to support and scale its strategic innovation roadmap. For around 2 decades, Align has utilized 3D printing technology to produce the molds for its Invisalign clear aligner products, but in recent years has been exploring direct printing of products. The integration of Cubicure is believed to be related to these efforts. Good for them. Interesting, Smile Direct Club went bankrupt 3-4 weeks ago. Align Technology, Invisalign, is expanding into a European company based on euros. I don't know Cubicure. I don't know the history of it at all. I assume, yes, they're making direct dental resins and that kind of thing. They don't have any more about it here in the notes. It was mainly the fact that it was an acquisition, a fairly large acquisition. $80 million, 80 million euro is not a small piece of chump change. Now, it's probably predominantly stock, but still, it's a big acquisition, shoving hard. And it actually, well, it kind of makes sense because now that Smile Direct Club has gone out of business, Invisalign has this market void that they now get to move into before some other new upstart pops up. So they'll certainly want to. They'll probably continue to be investing a little bit more highly than in past years in order to absorb that client base. Okay, Kickstarter for the testing lab. As of this moment, the Kickstarter is sitting at like $7,700. We're shooting for $10,000 in order to fund the Tensile testing machine so that we can do filament and 3D printed part testing. We've continued to release a number of those videos. You guys have probably seen them. They actually have gotten pretty good play and seem to be useful to everybody. A lot of the compression videos. So we're going to continue doing those. And by the time this podcast comes out, the Kickstarter will be done because I think it had 65 hours left at the time of filming this. So I can't plug it. Is what it is. It was funded or it wasn't. It's a big mystery. I wonder what happened. Comment down below what happened. Tell me. I wonder. But hopefully the Kickstarter closes there. It looks like it's on a good trend line to actually do that in the next couple of days. 2 days is kind of close for that amount of gap to close after 30 days. But it'll be, is what it is. We'll see what happens. Big wonder. This is interesting because I'm technically talking to you in the future, but I'm in the past and this is in the middle. I don't know how to deal with this situation. What should I say? That's going to be cool. We'll figure out something. We'll continue doing the testing videos one way or another. Like we said in the show before, the plan here is very likely to take those testing videos and put them into a separate YouTube channel, probably Tangled Testing. And within that, we'll test just all kinds of filaments, all types of settings, all types of parts, pieces, and situations. So a request for y'all. This week we tried a variation of the testing video, which was a Will It Blend video. A Will It Blend video of PLA, PETG, TPU, and nylon. And we took them and dropped them into a blender and saw what happened. We're going to be changing up the testing process on that to make it a little bit more informative. It was fun to watch, but we're going to tweak it a bit. Let us know what you think of the format because it was quite different from many of our other videos. So yeah, check it out. Let us know what you think. And if you want more of those type of videos, because it was fun to do. It was fun to do those. There's a lot of tests out there that are not very scientific. Throwing it into a blender really is not a very scientific test, but it is useful and interesting. Pushing materials to some kind of absurd extreme and then finding out what they can take and not take is a lot of fun and very interesting. So we'd like to do more like that. Probably with like the blender videos, what we might do is take like infill and scale it up to 100% infill and see how long that part holds together and then go backwards. The ones inside the last filament testing video were all 15, 20% if I recall correctly. So, yeah, that was the main one there. Okay, then. 3D printing topics, UV resistance. UV resistance is something that has come up a couple times this week. A number of clients have been asking about it, and we're going to be doing a video on it, kind of summarizing UV resistance, because it's a very misunderstood phenomenon. Both what is UV resistant and what isn't, and what does it actually mean. Many people automatically go to saying, oh, I have an outdoor product, I need ASA because it's UV resistant. Here's the thing with UV resistance. It's a little bit like fire, something burning. And I think I've discussed this before. But imagine you've got a tree, right? A tree, if a fire comes through that's a light, if a fire comes through, the outside of the tree burns and you get ash on the tree. But then that ash protects the interior of the tree from the rest of the fire because it starts to act like insulation. So yes, you have a black tree, but it can still be alive because it has this insulating layer of outer burned flesh. UV resistance is really similar. UV waves only go about, I want to say 60 nanometers deep into the surface. That's all the penetrating power they have. That's how deep they go into human skin, 60 nanometers, which means they can degrade and beat away at 60 nanometers at a time. That's not much. It's really small. It's very tiny. In that situation, effectively what you do is you are charring an outer layer of the plastic, and it's UV burned to where once it's kind of been beat up, it's fine. It's like it's not going to degrade the plastic deep into the part. So, but it will fade it. This is the thing that people are the reason UV resistance exists as a property that people care about is color consistency. You don't want a part to fade or change color over time. Most plastics, pretty much almost no plastic is inherently UV resistant. ASA is inherently UV resistant. All other plastics, ABS, PETG, PLA, all have to have an additive, a UV resistant additive to them in order to make them UV stable. This additive almost always makes them very difficult to work with and much more expensive. Here is the magic solution for UV resistance. Write this down because this is flipping gold. Paint your part. That's it. Grab yourself a rattle can of auto paint and paint your 3D printed part. By the way, you can paint any of your 3D printed part materials. I think maybe polycarbonate might be weird in that, but I don't even think that's the case. All 3D printed plastics will effectively take paint. You paint a layer of paint on there, it's UV resistant. You spent almost no effort at all. So very often when clients come to us asking for UV resistance, we'll say, can we paint the part? If you want the native printed color, then we'll do a clear coat and you can get a clear coat UV resistant paint put on it. If you just want it painted, we can just print it in PLA and paint it. And if it's in a temperate climate, you can use PLA for decades and it's not going to degrade, which is again a reason for our testing lab to prove this out through a long number of cycles. But many people, there's endless examples of PLA sitting around for forever. And there's also a little bit of misunderstanding about what PLA is. Everybody's like, oh, it's a bio-based plastic. It's biodegradable. You can't put that outside. No, PLA is plastic, just plastic, made from soybeans, but just plastic. And it will not just melt outside. It's not a freaking cow pie pot. It is plastic. So the weather resistance of 3D printed parts is wildly underrated because most of them are fine, and UV resistance is a highly overrated requirement because it's not difficult to achieve. Clear coat the part, you'll be fine. The plastic parts themselves, even if exposed to the sun, they'll fade fine, darn. Most plastic parts do, including, by the way, a lot of garden tools. If you leave your garden tools out on the garden, very likely they're going to turn white over summer or so from UV exposure. Most people don't have their plastic parts out in the sun 24/7, so it's not an issue. There are preciously few products in the world that have to sit in direct exposure to the sun 24/7 to where UV degradation is a big deal. So there's that. There, you got a preview of that video when we do it, because those are all the topics that we would cover of UV resistance. It's not a large factor. It's wildly overrated and not terribly important. If you are making a super rugged part that needs to go to sub-Saharan desert and it's going to be in the sun from dawn till dusk on the top of a post holding a chip or something like that, go ahead, use ASA. Otherwise, almost any other material is fine. Okay, patents and NDAs. Those are two very loaded topics. I'm going to start with patents. Patents are easier than NDAs and get me in less trouble. Patents. Okay. There's a lot of clients come to us who are pre-patent. They're in the process of getting their patent and they're working to get their product manufactured. So we end up signing an NDA to protect them while they're getting their patent. Patents are an offensive weapon. They are not a defensive weapon. And this is what people really misunderstand, because there's a glorified version of patents that everybody like hears in school or something, to where it's like, okay, I got a patent, my product is now mine for forever, and anybody else who wants to use my idea has to use my patent. That is not the case. If you receive a patent, the patent office does not enforce your patent. They may prevent other patents from being filed. Like, okay, I patented a pen. If anybody else tries to patent a pen, my patent might pop up, preventing them from creating a patent of the pen. The reason that doesn't work is that if my pen patent pops up, the lawyer for the other patent getter changes the wording of their patent so it no longer sounds like a pen. I patented a pen, a writing utensil with a ball in the tip. They patent a painting utensil with a ball that dispenses ink through the tip. Different patents. And that may sound silly and pedantic, but it is the case. The other thing is that there are multiple different types of patents. The other thing around getting around patents is that there's multiple different types of patents. There are utility patents and there's design patents. A utility patent is the process. That would be if I patented writing. It's like, okay, using a utensil to create drawings of shapes or symbols on paper, writing, referred to in this patent as writing, I hereby claim as having invented. Anybody else who does anything with writing is going to have to reference my patent. A design patent is, I designed a grip with two little swirls and some spiralies on there, and that is my design. A design patent is one step away from like a trademark. And a trademark is like an artwork or a logo or something like that. Or it is a logo or art. I'm thinking of copyright. Copyright is like the artwork. All of this is terribly muddled, and that's okay. And that's kind of on purpose. On their part, not on mine. But the design patent covers how the look and feel of a thing, how this is designed. Now the thing is, a design patent has zero protection whatsoever, because if you design this little rubber gripper here and you invented the rubber gripper and you say, oh, I have a design patent on it. Well, I say, okay, I want to make a rubber gripper. I'm going to make the spiral go the opposite direction, and I'm going to make it just cylindrical rather than having this little bit of indent on it. Mine's a different design. It looks different. Therefore, I get a patent for my design. But to a normal person, it looks just like this. In a patent dispute, this starts coming down to There's a famous legal saying around pornography and free speech where the judge said, "I can't define pornography, but I know it when I see it." Patent infringement is very similar. I don't know when I've infringed on a patent. You can't define when someone has infringed on a patent, but you know it when they see it. This is a rubber grip, and I designed another rubber grip that looks exactly almost the same. But it gets muddy. Where does the line get crossed? And this goes into like Creative Commons and public domain and that kind of thing. Like Mickey Mouse recently came into public domain. Okay, fine. That version of Mickey Mouse is still trademarked in a number of different formats and designs. When does Mickey Mouse stop being Mickey Mouse? For example, hold on, get a sheet of paper. Is that Mickey Mouse? Am I gonna get flagged? Are we gonna get demonetized because this Mickey Mouse is in the video? That's just 3 circles. Is that Mickey Mouse? Is that the Mickey Mouse logo? How about this? This is just 3 circles again. That could technically be a face, but they're in the same general area. Many people would say that's not Mickey Mouse, but in a court of law, people might argue that that is Mickey Mouse if I was referencing a mouse in relation to this image and that kind of stuff. This is why lawyers have increased faster than engineers since the 1970s. And that is not a joke. That is an actual statistic. Since the 1970s, there have been more lawyers produced than engineers inside the United States because of this kind of BS. So that's patent litigation, design patent, so on and so forth. The only way to enforce a patent, there is not an agency, there is not a part of the executive branch that goes out and enforces patents. Patents are enforced through civil suits, which means you have a patent, you own a patent, you see someone who you think is infringing on your patent, and you sue them for infringing on your patent. They then say, "I'm not infringing on your patent, I'm going to fight you." And then it becomes a battle of wills of, okay, you're both in court, they say they didn't infringe on your patent, you said they did, who has more money to pay lawyers for longer? That's the person who wins. It's a wildly jacked up system, but it is the system that exists. What is even more vicious is like patent trolls, which is kind of a side topic where you get a patent for a thing, but then some other guy, you get a patent for your grip on the writing utensil, and then some guy gets another patent for a grip on a writing utensil, and he sues you for infringing on his patent that he didn't create, and you have to, but you can avoid going to court simply by paying him a compensation. You basically bribe him away based on whatever his fee is to not sue you because he's probably a lawyer so he can represent himself, and you're going to have to go hire a lawyer. Otherwise, you'll lose, and then you'll owe him all of his fees and all that kind of stuff. So again, it's a terrible, patent trolls are a whole terrible other situation. But the only way to defend a patent is to go fight for your patent. So after you pay the $5,000 to $20,000 to get a patent, you wait the 2 to 5 years to get it approved. You then have to spend the remaining 20 years of the life of the patent fighting to prove that it's yours and making sure nobody else is taking it. If someone takes it who is bigger than you, if you're an independent inventor, you had a good idea, company wants your design, they can just start making it. And then you can sue them, and they will say, "We got lawyers on retainer. Go ahead and sue us. They're not doing anything this weekend. They'll go file paperwork against you, and we'll just bleed you dry." Because as an independent inventor, you probably don't have $100,000 to $250,000 to spend on defending your patent, whereas their lawyers who are hired full-time, year-round, for $100,000, they'll just say, "Jerry, you're that lawyer. We hired you. Get up here. You're going to file paperwork for the next year to keep this inventor away so that we don't have to deal with the patent stuff. And we'll bleed the inventor out, and then we're going to get the patent for nothing. And we'll buy it from him for $10,000 and be done, or never care about it again." So this is why patents are not useful, is that the only way, they do not magically protect you. They are a sword to brandish in battle. The only usefulness of patents is that once you are successful, you then use them to go and keep other organizations from competing with you. You become the big guy, and then you then use your patents to sue other little guys sprouting up, de-weeding the garden, because you're like, I'm growing my carrots here. So that is the only time that patents are actually a useful part of business strategy. When you're large enough to continue to enforce them, you can reduce competition around yourself. This is a typical and commonly used strategy to use the patent system. The patent system is not protective or even useful for individual inventors. So what do you do if you're an individual inventor? Your job as an individual inventor is to make yourself valuable as quickly as possible. A patent is not value. Oh, okay, hang on. Let me put that to the side here for a moment. You've got an invention. You've created a thing. Rather than getting a patent, use the $5,000 to start selling the thing. Because number one, say you got the patent, you still have no idea if your product is actually marketable, if people will actually buy it. You have no idea. Because if you have been signing NDAs and keeping your patent secret that whole time, no one else who is a customer has heard about your product. Otherwise, you invalidated your patent. Again, another conversation. If you have invented something, you have to get it out and selling as quickly as possible. And you have to learn the lessons of selling and getting it scaled up as quickly as possible. You have to hire a manufacturer as quickly as possible. What this does is it has you create an entity, an organization, a business, an operating system. And that operating system contained within itself is valuable. So when you invented the little pen grip, if you are now making thousands of pen grips, whether they're patented or not, you have done all the legwork to get these made. So when Mr. Big Corporation comes by and wants to make pen grips, rather than saying, we're going to patent it and that guy can try to sue us if they want to, but we're going to go make it, they will instead say, how about we just buy the inventor's company? Let's buy the company that's making these pen grips. They don't have a patent, boss. He's like, I don't care. They have the factory, the personnel, and everything else all set up and working, and they're making good pen grips. We're going to call them up and buy their company for $1 million. That is your competitive advantage. Also, if you have your product out there in the market, people know you to some degree. To some degree. Only to some degree. This is important because inventors often overvalue their brand, because they have no brand. You don't have a brand until you've sold a lot of stuff or have been seen by a lot of people. When you're pre-patent, you have no brand. But anyhow, so if you are an inventor who's created a product, get to sales as quickly as possible. Start moving the stuff, learning the lessons, building an organization. The organization has value. The idea has no value at all. Bluntly. Your idea has no value at all because you are going to run into all the nastiness of getting it made. Now, there is a version of the inventor journey where a patent is useful. And that is you get the patent, and then as soon as the patent is granted, you walk into Mr. Big Corporation and say, I have this patent for a thing you want. I'm going to sell you the patent. Which, by the way, is very similar to organization building. You just did all the legwork for them, so they're going to pay you for all of your legwork. It's the same as building the factory. Getting a patent is the same as building the factory. So which would you rather do? Get paperwork that says that you had a good idea or build a factory that actually does something useful? In that case, when you're licensing, you walk into Mr. Corporation and say, I have a patent, buy it from me. That can work. And they might do it. They might say, okay, you spent 10 grand on this patent. Yeah, we don't want to fight you. We don't want to have to deal with it. It's a decent idea. We'll pay you 20 grand for the patent. And you won't get a royalty. The royalty deal is wildly rare. So it's not lucrative, but it's a way where patents are useful and marketable and create value. Now, if you're a startup, if you're a company, patents are valuable because if you are raising investment, patents are still viewed as an asset class. where you can effectively put them on your balance sheet and show your portfolio of patents, and the investor's like, oh, look at all these patents, they're valuable. Here in Boise, we have Micron Technologies, which makes memory. Their headquarters is here. I once got to speak to one of their lawyers who was in charge of IP law and patents and acquisitions. And he said, and I had kind of this conversation with him where I expounded upon why I thought patents were stupid. And he said, Gabe, that's all correct. That's all correct. But here's the thing. If you have a company with no patents, it's worth this much. But if during the negotiations you shove a binder across the table to me of 5 or 10 or 20 patents or whatever else it was, your company value went from this to this. He said a patent portfolio will effectively triple the value of your startup. And at that, I took notice. So if your strategy is to be acquired or be a startup that is to be purchased by another company, then patents are very important to you, because in that case, they are actually a fairly low-cost way of radically increasing the value of the company to another company. Again, you built the company, so you did all the organization building that created the seed bed and the fertilizer for those patent seeds to be useful, but it's still true. But again, that doesn't apply to an individual inventor. If you've created a thing, the best way to get money from that thing is to start selling it. Show it to the world, learn your lessons, and know your product better than anybody else. Because the first version of your product is not going to be a good one. It never is. You are wrong about some part of your invention, and you don't know why. Whatever you've made, as perfect as it is, how much you've thought about it, it is not perfect or done. And customers are going to give you feedback to where you're going to want to change your product. As soon as you start selling it, you start gaining information, knowledge, and expertise to where you become more valuable. This is why it's so important for a new inventor to start selling your product as soon as possible. Forget the patent, sell the thing out the door. Once you're making money, once you know the product is actually useful, once you've done the test, then you can go patent it. Now people are like, oh, well, I presented it to the world, now I can't get a patent. BS. I worked as a product engineer for multiple years. And quite frankly, there were times when I had clients come to us and say, yeah, there's this patent, can we get around it? And as good engineers, we said, oh yeah, totally, we can create another version of that. That, as unscrupulous as it is, that is the case, because inventing another version to solve the same problem, it's like saying 2 plus 2 equals 4. Well, we invented 5 minus 1 equals 4. Same result, different direction of getting there. It's no less legitimate. It's just a different way that is also patentable. So defending patents is very difficult. It's very expensive. Patents themselves are very expensive. They're only useful if you're using them offensively or to increase the value of an existing company, or if you want to make just kind of chump change selling the patent off to somebody else because you already have those relationships. If you already have those relationships. There are guys who just come up with ideas and they've got like a toy company sitting behind them who's like, oh yeah, we'll buy whatever frog jumping toy you come up with, Frank. Just send us the paperwork over each time you finish one. And they're effectively kind of a contractor in that regard. But they make a good living. But yes, patents are just a terrible startup tool. They don't help you. They are not a significant competitive advantage. They do not appreciably, at the start, when you're an inventor, they are not a competitive advantage. They don't radically increase the value of your organization. You have to figure out how to make your product. That creates value when you are an inventor. Start selling it. Make an Etsy store, make a Shopify store, list the product for sale, start figuring out how to sell it. Once you are selling it, it starts to have value. Also, by the way, no one is trying to steal your idea. This is also something that's radically overestimated by individual inventors. No one is trying to steal your idea, not even China. No one wants to steal your idea unless it is proven to be a good idea. If you are making your product in a Chinese factory and you are making tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of them, or you have sold them over and over again, then they might steal your idea. But when you are random Joe inventor who shows up and says, I need 500 parts or I need my first 1,000, they do not give a damn. They are going to sit back and watch you spend your money to find out if the idea is any good. Then they'll steal your idea, but not before. But if that is the case and you sold 100,000 of them or whatever else it was, you are now the market leader. You are the one who figured out how to sell it. You still have a wild competitive advantage over some manufacturer in China who's like, oh, well, we're going to make it too and we're going to list it on eBay or something. They can't compete with you. If you sold 100,000 of them, you do legitimately have a brand. You have a customer base. You have distributor relationships. You have a far larger competitive advantage than the knockoff. So don't be scared of people stealing your ideas because number one, most people don't care. Because 90, not to be negative, but 99 out of 100 ideas fail and are worth nothing. And then once in a while, one will be worth something, not necessarily a knock out of the park. And every manufacturer who has inventors come through all day long knows this. So it's very interesting. This is interesting. If you guys are ever reaching out to like us, Slant 3D, to produce your product or something like that, we have inventors call up and say, is my idea protected? Are you guys going to protect it? And yes, we do. We go through the NDA process. We have our privacy policy on the website for anything submitted to us. It's kept private because we want to respect our clients' work. But it's also always kind of funny because we have 5 calls a day with inventors who are saying, can you mass produce my product? Can you mass produce my product? Can you mass produce my product? And they're like, how do we know you're not going to just rip us off and sell the product yourself? And the answer is, you're likely going to fail. I don't want to be involved with your product. We got enough of our own work and problems to deal with. I don't want to try to create your back scratcher company. And based on historical data of people coming through our organization, most companies don't survive. Most product companies don't survive and actually get large enough sales to continue to survive. So it's always interesting in that context. So hopefully that was a good enough spiel on patents. I hope it was useful because like the patent dynamics and patents are wildly overrated and they shouldn't be. Patents should be far more underrated than they are because they're so unvaluable. And a patent lasts for 20 years. Who cares? There is not a single invention in the world right now that has a life cycle of 20 years. No one is inventing light bulbs that are going to be used for the next 100 years. There's nothing like that. There's very few fundamental technologies to where having a patent will be valuable for the next 20 years. So much of it is derivative that it has to change and move and all the rest of it. So it's like Apple patenting the home button on the phone, on the original iPhones. Good for them. They used it as a competitive stop to make sure nobody else could make a home button or something. But they killed the home button before the patent even ran out. It wasn't 10 years before the home button was removed from iPhones. So products just move so quickly that the value of the patent for protection is decreased unless those few years that you get are really valuable. If you're talking Apple versus Samsung, tripping up the other guy for 2 years is a big deal in the technology space where everything is moving so quickly. But for your back scratcher or whatever else it was, it's tough to defend. It's not a big competitive advantage. It's really expensive. You're going to spend a huge amount of capital getting the patent, and you still don't know if the product will sell. Sell the product. I highly, highly recommend just go and sell the product. Slap it together in your basement and start trying to sell them. Buy a couple 3D printers, start trying to sell it. Do not chase down the patent. A patent is an ego metric. It makes you feel important and useful, but it's not useful in the actual success or longevity of the company. So, I don't recommend patents. Okay, NDAs. NDAs. Another kind of useless piece of paper. So let me pre-qualify this so I don't get in trouble. Slant 3D, any employee that comes to work at Slant 3D has to sign an NDA, so they don't walk out the door and start sharing Instagram posts about what the stuff they saw at work. We also have a privacy policy, and if a client reaches out to us, they can send across their own individual NDA, and we're willing to sign that. But that all aside now, talking about NDAs in a very brute force kind of a way, NDAs are a flippin' useless form of legal protection. The first reason is most of the time, the NDA that people send across, again, very often individual inventors, is a template that they pulled down from online, which doesn't have like a timeline of when the information is to be protected or the scope of where the information is to be protected. It's very incomplete to such a degree that it's almost ineffectual. It says, you're not going to steal my ideas or something like that. Some of them are so bad that they're actually too broad and they have like no timeline on them. Like most NDAs say this agreement will be in effect for 2 years after the information is shared. That's a typical type of NDA. It's like, okay, yeah, sure. Some of them don't put that timeline in there, and we can't sign those NDAs because it basically means you're going to keep this secret forever. And we're like, no, we're not. We can't sign that. We can't sign that. So we'll send back the NDA and say you have to send us a different NDA because we can't sign that. It's just we can't put a legal shackle around our neck to look at what you might want to have made. Because the NDA comes before files have been sent or anything like that. At this point, we don't even know if the potential client knows that their part can be 3D printed. So NDAs are just, quite frankly, from a contractor's standpoint, they're wildly irritating. Because there's all this stance of, you're going to steal my idea, we're not going to steal your idea, here's proof we're not going to steal your idea, here we got to send this NDA to our lawyer because it's your downloaded template that doesn't work and that kind of thing. At the end of it all, we find out that the part is some flowery, wispy thing that can't possibly be manufactured with any method known to man. And then we're like, glad we just did all that work to find out that the part doesn't even work and we can't do anything with it. And this client isn't worth any money, quite frankly. The other thing, and this is a thing that many people misunderstand with NDAs, is that they think that they protect them. And again, NDAs are very much like patents in that if you, hypothetically, if you brought a part to Slant 3D and we did decide to rip you off and just start making them tomorrow or something like that, the only way you could stop us is to sue us and come to court with your NDA and say they're stealing my idea. And by the way, very often court documents are public. So you also kind of screw yourself because you have to present all the information publicly. So it's just wildly unhelpful for you to do an NDA because the only way to enforce it is for you to spend a bunch of money enforcing it. So the best possible situation for an NDA is that the contract manufacturer signs it and respects it, as a good contractor should. But you created a bad relationship with contractor because you basically said, I don't trust you, say you're not going to screw me. That's what an NDA means. I don't trust you, I need you to sign on paper that you're not going to screw me. That's what an NDA means. That is what it means. That is pure English language of what an NDA is. I need you to say, I don't believe your handshake. I need you to say you're not going to steal my idea. And that's like walking up to somebody and saying, I trust you, buddy, but I want you to say you're not going to pickpocket me tonight. What did I do? It's just kind of wildly, it's not starting a relationship on a good foot because a manufacturer is an investor and a partner in your business. So to start off with an investor and a partner and say, I don't trust you, say you're going to protect my stuff is not a good foot to start off of. In the context of manufacturers talking about that, manufacturers being investors, they are. A contract manufacturer, especially in the States, has a lot of options. We can do a lot of work for a lot of different people. To say yes to a client means that we're saying no to potentially some other client. So that is a risk that we take by putting our time and effort into your business, and also paying attention to you and doing a good job and helping out and offering design advice, again, is a way of helping the client by investing in their business and being a partner. Because if the client is successful, then we're successful. We're going to make a lot of parts for you long term. So we want to help you be successful. But if a client is not successful, then we just lost all of our investment. We just lost all of that time that we could have put over here. So it's very... I would request, and this is selfish because I work in contract manufacturing, but I would request that you be very nice to contract manufacturers, because they, once you partner with one too, they also kind of are they're your key partner. Because if they get mad at you, they'll say, okay, go find somebody else to make your stuff. And then you're back at square one. And it's a wild kick in the gonads. So anyhow, yes, manufacturers are very much partners. NDAs at best create a bad first impression, and they don't really protect you, because there's no sheriff going to walk down and say that manufacturer is stealing your idea based on the NDA. It's not. You have to send your lawyer down and lawyer up and all the rest of it. There's so much of civil law is self-enforced. And then the judge is just there to read in between the lines and say, "Oh yeah, this is frivolous," or "No, really." But that's that's why we need tort reform. So yeah, patents and NDAs are both very, very jacked up. But hopefully you learned a little bit of something about patents and how to kind of use them strategically. There's usefulness to them. Everything has a usefulness. But so often, if you're an individual product creator, many of these kind of traditional business tools that are around there aren't very useful, because you just because you don't have the resources to enforce them. And your resources are better spent trying to get sales than trying to prove that you had a great idea on paper, which is what a patent is. I had the great idea. When you're new, you do not have the luxury of being arrogant and patting your own ego by having the rest of the world certify what you did was good. The only way you can have the rest of the world certify that you were good is to sell a bunch of stuff. So yeah, that's patents and NDAs there, guys. Bring up down in the comments if there's other topics like that you want to talk about, like in the context of business operations, kind of... Hashtag not a lawyer, by the way, all this stuff, not a lawyer with any of these things. I probably should have said that at the beginning. But again, this is not legal advice. This is purely entertainment purposes at all. But it is what it is. But there I am, just covering my tail so nobody can sue me when they don't get a patent and they get sued, or they don't sue, or they don't sell enough items and then they sue me for giving them advice or whatever else it was. This is not legal advice. This is education and entertainment for the fun of it, and education or entertainment purposes only. Okay. Not a lawyer. Just dealt with a lot of patents and stuff. So, okay. Well, that's it, guys. That's the whole thing for the podcast this week. Thank you all who supported the Kickstarter. Thank you all who have been subscribing to and watching the channel. Let us know if there's any content that you want to see, any other topics that you'd like us to talk about here on this podcast. Have a great day, everybody.